It was a bitter February evening in Brooklyn, the kind of cold that sank into your bones and made every step feel heavier. Elliot trudged through the snow, his dock worker's jacket zipped tight against the wind, his shoulders hunched from a double shift at the port. Beside him, Noah, his 12-year-old son, kicked at slush. His sneakers soaked his face, half hidden under a wool cap. They'd planned to grab dinner at the diner on Atlantic Avenue, a rare treat after weeks of ramen and canned soup. Their budget stretched thin since Maya's mother passed. The diner's neon sign flickered, casting a warm glow over the icy sidewalk, but Noah stopped short, his breath clouding in the air. "Dad, look," he whispered, pointing to a small shape curled against the diner's brick wall. There, half buried in snow, was a brown puppy. Her fur matted her body, trembling so faintly it was hard to tell if she was alive. Her amber eyes, like embers in a dying fire, caught the light, staring out with a quiet plea that pierced Noah's heart. People hurried past, some stepping over her tail, others glancing but not slowing their faces, blank or distracted. A group of teens laughed nearby, one tossing a soda can that skittered close to her paws, but she didn't flinch. Noah's eyes widened, his gloved hand tugging Elliot's sleeve. "We can't leave her, Dad. She's freezing." Elliot sighed, his breath a sharp puff in the cold, his mind already listing reasons to keep walking. Their tiny apartment, the vet bills, they couldn't afford the landlord's no-pet rule. But Noah's voice cracked with urgency, his brown eyes, so like Maya's, brimming with a stubborn hope Elliot hadn't seen since the funeral. He knelt beside Noah, the snow soaking his jeans, and saw the puppy's ribs, faint outlines under her thin frame. She didn't growl or cower, just watched them, her gaze steady as if measuring their intentions. Noah slipped off his scarf, unwrapping his sandwich from the diner, a turkey club he'd been saving, and tore off a piece. He held it out, his hand shaking not from cold, but from fear she'd reject it. The puppy sniffed, then took it gently, her teeth careful, her eyes never leaving Noah's face. Each slow chew felt like a question. "Are you the one who stays?" Elliot's chest tightened, his own childhood, flashing back a stray cat he'd fed behind the docks until it vanished. He looked at Noah, now crouching low, whispering to the puppy soft words Elliot couldn't hear, but felt in his gut. The diner. Door swung open, warm air spilling out with the smell of fries and coffee, a family bustling past without a glance. Noah's voice rose. "She's all alone, Dad. Nobody's coming for her." Elliot rubbed his face, the stubble rough under his gloves, knowing Maya would be waiting at home, her shift at the hospital ending soon. He wanted to say no, to walk away, to protect Noah from the pain of caring too much, but those amber eyes held him too, like they saw through his excuses. Noah named her right then. "Ember," he said, "because she's still burning even in all this snow." The name fit her perfectly, her faint warmth a spark against the gray. Elliot stood, his knees creaking, and scanned the street for an owner, a kid calling. How to call her in the snow, but there was nothing, just the endless shuffle of boots and tires. Noah fed her another bite, his sandwich, dwindling, his own hunger forgotten. A woman in a puffy coat stepped around them, muttering about strays, and Elliot felt a flare of anger, not at her, but at the world that left a creature like this to fade. He pulled out his phone, checking the time, knowing they couldn't stay forever, but Noah's hand rested on Ember's head now, her trembling easing just a fraction. "Dad, please," Noah said, not begging but stating a truth. "She needs us." Elliot's throat closed, the weight of his son's heart heavier than the cold. He nodded once sharp and said, "Okay, let's figure this out." They stayed there a moment longer, Noah's smile breaking through like dawn, the puppy's eyes flickering with something new, maybe trust, maybe hope. Elliot didn't know what came next, but he knew they couldn't walk away, not tonight, not from her. The diner's parking lot was a patchwork of slush and tire tracks, the neon glow from the Atlantic Avenue sign casting long shadows as Elliot and Noah stood by the shivering brown puppy they'd named Ember. Her amber eyes glinted faintly, reflecting the light like dying coals, refusing to fade. Noah crouched low, his turkey sandwich gone now, every crumb offered to the puppy, who ate with measured bites, as if savoring each one against a memory of hunger. Elliot's boots crunched in the snow, his hands stuffed deep in his dockworker's jacket, his mind racing with practicalities. Their one-bedroom apartment barely fit the three of them. The fridge held half a gallon of milk and a jar of pickles. And Maya's hospital shifts left little room for surprises. Noah's scarf lay draped over Ember's trembling frame, her thin body soaking up its warmth. "Dad, we can't leave her here," Noah said again, his voice steady, but his eyes wide with a fear that mirrored Elliot's own, not of the puppy, but of what caring might cost. Maya's car pulled into the lot, her headlights cutting through the dusk, her nurse's scrubs visible through the windshield. She stepped out, her breath clouding her face, drawn from a 12-hour shift, but softening when she saw Noah kneeling in the snow. "What's going on?" she asked, her gaze shifting from her son to the small brown shape beside him. Elliot explained quickly, the words tumbling out. "Found her by the wall, no collar, nobody's looking for her." Maya knelt beside Noah, her gloved hand, brushing Ember's matted fur, her nurse's instincts kicking in. "She's dehydrated," she said softly, "and way too thin, but her eyes are clear, no cloudiness." Noah looked up at her, his cap slipping back. "Can we take her home, Mum? Just for tonight?" Maya's lips pressed tight, her eyes meeting Elliot's over Noah's head. They'd lost her mother 6 months ago, the grief still a quiet guest in there. Home and money was tighter than ever, the port's unsteady hours, and her part-time shifts barely covering rent. But Noah's hand rested on Ember's head now, his fingers gentle, and Ember leaned into him, her trembling easing, like she'd chosen him already. Elliot saw it, felt it, a spark of something he couldn't name. Maya stood brushing snow from her knees and checked Ember for tags or a chip, finding nothing but dirt and ice. "We should wait," she said. "Maybe someone's inside getting food." They moved to the car, Ember wrapped in Noah's scarf and Elliot's jacket, a small bundle Noah refused to let go of. The heater hummed, warming the cramped sedan as they watched the diner's door swing open and shut, customers coming and going, none sparing a glance for the empty spot where Ember had been. Noah's voice broke the silence. What if she was dumped? What if nobody's coming? Elliot gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale, remembering the cat from his childhood left behind when his family moved. Maya reached for Noah's hand, her thumb tracing his knuckles. "Let's give it an hour," she said. They waited, the car's clock ticking past 40 minutes, then 50, the lot emptying as the dinner rush slowed. A man in a cook's apron stepped out to smoke, glanced their way, then turned back inside. No one asked, no one searched. Noah twisted in his seat, his eyes locked on Ember, now curled in his lap, her nose tucked under her tail. "She's so small," he whispered. Elliot's chest ached, the weight of his son's heart, heavier than the cold. Maya sighed, her breath shaky, and leaned against Elliot's shoulder. "We can't leave her out here," she said, "not in this weather, not alone." Elliot nodded, his throat tight, knowing this wasn't just about a puppy, but about Noah, about the boy who hadn't smiled like this since the funeral, who carried guilt for not visiting his grandmother in time. "It's okay," he said. "Let's take her home for now." Noah's face lit up, a grin so wide it cracked Elliot's defenses. They drove through Brooklyn's quiet streets, the snow falling thicker now, streetlights blurring into halos. Ember stirred in Noah's arms, her amber eyes blinking slow, like she sensed the shift. Maya called a friend at the hospital, a vet tech who promised to check for lost dog reports. Noah leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "She's not a stray anymore. He said she's Ember." Elliot caught Maya's eye in the rearview mirror, a silent agreement passing between them, years of marriage distilling to this moment. They didn't know what tomorrow held, vet bills or landlord fights, or how to explain a dog to their grief-worn lives, but tonight they'd chosen hope. Ember sighed, a small sound like trust settling in, and Noah hugged her closer, whispering, "You're safe now, we've got you." The car turned onto their street, the apartment building's faded brick looming ahead, and Elliot felt it again, that spark like Ember's eyes glowing against the dark. The apartment was a cramped cocoon of warmth against the February chill, its walls papered in faded yellow, the air thick with the scent of coffee and last night's spaghetti. Elliot pushed open the door, his boots leaving wet prints on the linoleum, as Noah carried Ember inside, still wrapped in his scarf and jacket, her amber eyes half closed but alert. Maya followed, flipping on the radiator which hissed to life, and rummaged through the closet for old towels to make a bed by the heat. Noah set Ember down gently on the pile, her small body sinking into the fabric, her trembling now a faint shiver as the warmth reached her bones. Elliot stood back, his hands on his hips, watching Noah kneel beside her. his 12-year-old face lit with a focus that hadn't been there since before the hospital vigils for Maya's mother. The living room was cluttered with second-hand furniture, a sagging couch, a coffee table scarred from Noah's toy cars, and a bookshelf stuffed with Maya's nursing textbooks and Elliot's worn paperbacks. Noah pulled a chipped bowl from the kitchen, filling it with water from the tap, and set it near Ember, whispering, "Drink slow, okay?" She lapped at it, her tongue, hesitant at first, then steadier each sip, pulling her further from the snow's grip. Maya knelt beside them, her nurse's hands gentle as she checked Ember's ears and paws, finding no frostbite, just dirt and a scrape on one pad. "She's tougher than she looks," Maya said, her voice soft, but her eyes heavy with the weight of the day. Elliot grabbed his phone, scrolling for the number of a local shelter, his thumb hovering over the call button. "We need to report her," he said, more to himself than the room in case someone's looking. Noah's head snapped up, his cap still skewed from the cold. "But she's ours now, right?" Elliot didn't answer, his jaw tight, the memory of his childhood. Cat-sharp, a stray he'd loved until it disappeared. Maya caught his hesitation, her hand brushing his arm, a silent plea to tread lightly. "Let's just make her comfortable tonight," she said. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Noah nodded, but his eyes stayed on Ember, who curled tighter into the towels, her nose tucked under her tail, like she was guarding what little warmth she'd found. Elliot called the shelter, leaving a voicemail about a brown puppy, no collar, found. On Atlantic Avenue, his voice clipped but his gaze lingering on Noah, who hadn't moved from Ember's side. The boy pulled a granola bar from his pocket, breaking off tiny pieces and offering them one by one Ember, taking each with a gentleness that made Elliot's throat ache. Noah talked to her, his voice low, spilling secrets he hadn't shared since the funeral. "Grandma loved dogs," he said. "You would have liked her. She'd sneak you treats." Elliot froze halfway to the kitchen, his heart lurching at the mention of Maya's mother, the woman who'd filled their home with laughter until cancer stole it away. Noah's guilt was a quiet shadow he'd confessed once to Elliot that he hadn't visited her enough, hadn't said goodbye, and now it spilled out to Ember, who listened, her amber eyes steady. Maya sat on the couch, her knees pulled up, watching her son with a mix of pride and pain, her fingers twisting the hem of her scrubs. "She's already got him wrapped around her paw," she whispered to Elliot, who grunted but didn't disagree. He saw it too, the way Noah's shoulders relaxed, the way his voice softened, like Ember was pulling him back from some edge. The radiator clanked, the only sound for a moment, as Ember's breathing slowed, her body finally still. Noah lay on the floor beside her, his head propped on one hand, his eyes tracing her every twitch. Elliot wanted to tell him to go to bed, to not get too attached, but the word stuck, his own heart snagged by the sight of his son, so present, so alive. Maya stood stretching and grabbed a blanket from the couch, draping it over Noah's legs. "You're on puppy duty tonight," she said, her tone light, but her eyes saying more. Noah nodded, his face serious. "I won't let her be scared," he said. Elliot turned off the overhead light, leaving just the lamp's glow casting soft shadows across the room. Ember stirred her head, lifting to look at Noah, then settling back, a faint sigh escaping her. Elliot leaned against the doorway, his arms. Crossed his mind a tangle of worry and wonder. They couldn't keep her, not really, not with their lives stretched so thin, but tonight she was here, and Noah was smiling, and that was enough. He glanced at Maya, who nodded toward their bedroom, a silent agreement to let this moment hold. As they left, Noah whispered to Ember, "You're home now, don't worry." And in the quiet, Elliot felt that spark again, like Ember's eyes glowing brighter, promising something he couldn't yet name. Morning broke through the apartment's thin curtains, a grey light filtering over the cluttered living room where Ember slept on her towel bed by the radiator, her small brown body curled tight but breathing steady. Noah was already awake, his hair mussed, his eyes puffy from staying up half the night, watching her every twitch, his hoodie zipped over his pajamas. Elliot stumbled out of the bedroom, coffee mug in hand, his dock worker's frame stiff from the couch, where he dozed after checking on Noah at midnight. Maya was up too, her nurse's scrubs swapped for a sweater, her hair pulled back as she scrolled her phone for a vet clinic that wouldn't break their budget. Ember stirred, her amber eyes blinking open, catching the light like polished stones, and Noah knelt beside her, offering a bowl of water, his voice soft. "Good morning, girl. You feeling okay?" She lapped slowly, her tail giving a single weak thump, and Elliot felt a pang at how fragile she looked in daylight. Her ribs sharper, her fur dull with grime. Maya found a clinic nearby, a place that took walk-ins and offered discounts for strays. Her voice practical, but her eyes soft as she watched Noah stroke Ember's head. "We need to get her checked out," she said. "Make sure she's not sick or chipped." Noah nodded, but his shoulders tensed, his fingers pausing on Ember's ear. "What if she has an owner?" he asked, his voice small, the question hanging heavy. Elliot sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him as he wrestled with the same fear, not of an owner claiming her, but of Noah's heartbreaking if they did. "Let's just take it one step at a time," he said, pulling on his boots, the words feeling hollow against of the hope in his son's eyes. They wrapped Ember in a clean towel, Noah insisting on carrying her. Her slight weight barely sinking into his arms as they piled into the car, the heater rattling against the February chill. The vet's office was a small brick building off Flatbush, its waiting room smelling of antiseptic and wet fur, a bulletin board plastered with lost pet flyers that made Elliot's stomach twist. The vet, a wiry woman with grey streaks in her braid, took one look at Ember and waved them into an exam room, her hands quick but gentle as she checked Ember's vitals. "Dehydrated, malnourished, but no fever," she said, scanning for a microchip, her machine beeping twice with no result. Noah's breath hitched, his eyes locked on Ember, who lay still on the table, her amber gaze steady, as if trusting them to decide her fate. "She's about 6 months old," the vet added, "probably a terrier mix, tough little thing to survive this long." Noah grinned, his face lighting up, and said, "Her name's Ember because of her eyes." The vet smiled, writing it down, her pen scratching loud in the quiet room. "No chip, no collar, no reports matching her description," she said, "but you should check with a shelter just in case." Elliot nodded, his jaw tight, the practicality of it clashing with the warmth in Noah's voice as he whispered to Ember, "You're staying with us, right?" The drive to the shelter was short, the Brooklyn street still dusted with snow tires crunching as they pulled into a lot beside a low building with a mural of paw prints on its wall. Inside the shelter was warm, its lobby, lined with crates and the soft hum of barking dogs, a young woman at the counter greeting them with a tired smile. She took Ember's details, her fingers tapping on a keyboard, as Noah held Ember close, her nose tucked into his elbow. "No missing reports for a brown terrier puppy," she said after a moment, her voice kind but matter-of-fact. "Doesn't mean no one's looking, but it's not likely." Elliot felt a mix of relief and dread, knowing this made Ember theirs to decide on, but also theirs to afford. Maya asked about adoption rules, her nurse's logic, mapping out the next steps, while Noah's eyes pleaded silently. The woman handed them a form, temporary custody, pending a hold period, her pen circling a number to call for updates. Back home, Noah set Ember on her towel bed, his hands gentle, as he offered her a few bits of boiled chicken Maya had prepped per the vet's advice. Ember ate, her tail wagging now, a slow rhythm that filled the room with life. Elliot watched from the kitchen, his coffee cold now, his mind stuck on Noah's question at the vet. What if she has an owner? He wanted to protect his son from the pain of loss, the way he couldn't when Maya's mother died. But Ember's presence was already changing things. Noah's smile brighter, his voice surer. Maya sat beside Noah, her hand on his shoulder, as Ember curled up, her amber eyes closing in trust. "She's already part of him," Maya whispered to Elliot later, her voice thick with emotion. He nodded, his throat tight, knowing they were in deeper than he'd planned, but unable to imagine Ember anywhere else. The week unfolded in the cramped Brooklyn apartment like a quiet unfolding of spring. Despite the February snow still blanketing the streets, Ember's presence weaving into the family's rhythm with a warmth that felt both fragile and fierce. Noah woke each morning before his alarm, his sneakers already by the door, his eyes darting to Ember's towel bed, where she lay curled, her brown fur less matted, now her amber eyes brighter as she gained strength. Elliot shuffled through his morning routine, his dockworker's hands clumsy with the coffee pot, his gaze softening as he watched Noah teach Ember to sit using bits of boiled chicken as rewards, her tail wagging in earnest, now a metronome of trust. Maya moved through the apartment with purpose, her nurse's efficiency guiding Ember's care, small bowls of water and food set out at intervals, her smile lingering when Ember followed Noah room to room like a shadow made of light. The living room, once heavy with the silence of grief, now hummed with small sounds, Ember's paws tapping on the linoleum. Noah's laughter as she chased a knotted sock Maya's hum while folding laundry. Elliot called the shelter daily, his voice low as he checked for claims, each no reports matching Ember, a relief that tightened his chest with both hope and dread, their landlord's no-pet rule a shadow in his mind. Noah took Ember outside each afternoon, bundled in his hoodie, the backyard a patch of snow-dusted grass, where she sniffed and bounded, her energy growing, her amber eyes scanning the fence line like she was mapping her new world. Maya shared stories. Over dinner, her voice warm with memories of her childhood dog, a mutt named Clover, who'd slept at her feet during thunderstorms, and Noah listened wide-eyed. His fork paused as he imagined Ember doing the same. Elliot fixed a leaky faucet one evening, his tools spread across the kitchen table, his grumbles fading as Ember nudged his knee, her nose warm against his calloused hand, a gesture that caught him off guard, his heart tripping over the trust in her gaze. Noah's friends from school stopped by one afternoon, their sneakers squeaking on the stairs, their chatter filling the apartment, as they knelt to pet Ember, her tail a blur, as she soaked up their attention. "She's so cool," Noah's friend, Jamal said, and Noah beamed his chest, puffing with pride as he showed how Ember could high-five his hand, a trick he'd taught her in 2 days. The shelter's hold period stretched on no calls, no posters, no one claiming the brown puppy with amber eyes, and Elliot began to let himself imagine her staying the couch's armrest, now her favorite perch where she watched the street through the window. Maya bought a cheap collar from the drugstore, its red nylon bright against Ember's fur, Noah clipping it on with reverence, his fingers tracing the buckle like it was a promise. They took her for short walks around the block, Noah holding the leash, his steps careful, Ember trotting beside him, her nose lifting to catch the city's scents. Neighbors nodded, some stopping to ask her name, their smiles softening when Noah said Ember, his voice carrying a quiet certainty. Elliot watched from a distance, his hands in his pockets, the sight of his son so alive, stirring something he hadn't felt since Noah was small, a fierce need to protect this joy. Maya noticed it too, her hand finding Elliot's one night as they sat on the couch, Ember sprawled across Noah's lap, her snores a soft rhythm. "He's different," she whispered, happier, like she's unlocking something in him. Elliot nodded, his throat tight. The memory of Noah's silence after the funeral still raw, the way he'd stopped talking about his grandmother, stopped smiling until Ember. The apartment felt fuller now, not just with Ember's presence, but with moments, Noah's laugh when Ember stole his sock, Maya's stories filling the air, Elliot's rare grin when Ember flopped beside him during the news. They hadn't planned for a dog, hadn't planned for the vet bills or the extra food or the way she'd slip into their hearts. But here she was, her amber eyes meeting theirs each morning, like a question answered. Noah started leaving notes on the fridge, Ember's schedule, water at 7, food at 8, walk at 4, his handwriting neat, his care meticulous. Elliot saw it and felt a swell of pride, his son stepping into responsibility with a seriousness that belied his 12 years. Maya framed a photo Noah had taken Ember mid-leap in the backyard, her ears flopping, her eyes glowing, and hung it by the door, a quiet claim on their new reality. As the week ended, Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, Ember's head in his lap, his voice low as he told her about school, about the math test he'd aced, about missing his grandmother, but feeling her in the room somehow. Elliot overheard his coffee mug, paused halfway to his lips, and knew Ember wasn't just a dog. She was a bridge, a spark, pulling them back to each other. The backyard was a small square of snow-dusted grass behind the Brooklyn apartment, its chain link, fence sagging under winter's weight, the gate's latch loose from years of neglect. Noah tossed a knotted sock for Ember, her brown fur gleaming now, her amber eyes bright as she bounded after it, her paws kicking up powdery snow in the late February light. Elliot watched from the kitchen window, his coffee mug warm in his hands. His dock worker's shift cancelled due to a crane breakdown, a rare afternoon off. Noah's laughter rang out sharp and clear, a sound that had been scarce since Maya's mother passed, and Elliot felt a quiet gratitude for Ember, who darted back to Noah, dropping the sock at his feet, her tail wagging like a metronome. Maya was at the hospital, Her nurse's scrubs swapped for a coat when she'd left that morning, her smile lingering as she'd kissed Noah's forehead and scratched Ember's ears. The game of fetch stretched on Noah's cheeks, flushed his hoodie unzipped despite the cold, his voice coaxing Ember to chase again. She leapt her small body twisting mid-air to catch the sock, her joy a spark against the grey day. Elliot turned to grab a snack, the fridge's hum drowning out the backyard sounds, but a sharp yelp cut through short and raw, slicing his calm. He dropped the butter tub, his boots skidding on the linoleum as he bolted outside the screen door, slamming behind him. Noah was halfway across the yard, his sneakers slipping in the snow, his face pale as he sprinted toward the open gate, the sock lying abandoned, the latch swinging free. Ember was gone. Elliot's heart slammed his chest, a cold fist of panic as he scanned the empty alley beyond the fence, its shadows swallowing any trace of her. Noah's voice cracked. "Dad, she was right here. I looked down for a second, I swear." Elliot grabbed his son's shoulders, his hands steady despite the tremor in his gut. "It's okay, we'll find her." Noah's eyes welled, his breath hitching, the guilt of losing her twisting his face, the same guilt he'd carried since missing his grandmother's final days. Elliot pulled him close, a rare hug his own fear buried, to keep Noah steady. Maya's car pulled up minutes later, her shift cut short by a slow day, her face falling as Elliot explained the gate, the yelp, the empty yard. They split up, Elliot on, his bike pedaling north through slushy streets, Maya driving south, Noah on foot, calling Ember's name, his voice raw against the city's hum. Hours ticked by, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows over Brooklyn's brownstones and bodegas. Elliot checked alleys, his breath clouding as he asked dog walkers and delivery drivers if they'd seen a brown puppy with amber eyes. No one. Had her red collar, her silver tag reading "Ember loved, always nowhere in sight." Maya called shelters, her phone pressed tight, her voice steady, but her hands shaking when she hung up with nothing. Noah trudged block after block, his sneakers soaked, his cap lost somewhere, his cries for Ember growing hoarse. Elliot's legs ached, his mind flashing to worst-case scenarios, Ember darting into traffic, scared alone, her trust in them broken. They regrouped at dusk, the apartment heavy with silence, Noah sinking to the couch, his face buried in his hands, the blanket Ember slept on clutched tight. Maya knelt beside him, her arms around him, whispering, "She's smart, she knows us, she'll come back." But her eyes met Elliot's, filled with the same dread. He felt the helplessness of loss, too familiar. Elliot printed flyers that night, his hands unsteady as he typed, "Found puppy now missing," taping them to poles under streetlights the next morning. Noah barely ate, his gaze fixed on the back door, as if Ember might trot through her tail, wagging. Elliot's throat burned the memory of Noah's laughter just hours ago, now a ghost. Then at 6 p.m., his phone buzzed, a number he didn't know, the voice of a bodega clerk 2 blocks from the diner. "Saw a brown puppy in the alley behind our loading dock. She said, looks lost, but okay." Elliot dropped the phone, Maya grabbing her keys. Noah already at the door, his sneakers untied. They drove through twilight, the city's lights blurring the diners. Neon sign a beacon as they pulled into the alley. The clerk waited, pointing to a dumpster's shadow, and there was Ember, her fur streaked with dirt. One paw scraped, her amber eyes wide but alive. Noah stepped forward, his voice a whisper. "Ember." She staggered toward him, her tail wagging weak but sure, her head pressing into his chest as he sank to his knees, sobbing her name. Elliot's knees buckled, relief flooding him as Maya wrapped her arms around them both. They brought her home, Ember curled in Noah's lap, her breathing steady now, her trust unbroken. Elliot locked the gate that night, his hands shaking, vowing to fix it tomorrow. Noah held Ember close, whispering, "I'm sorry I won't lose you again," her amber eyes glowing like a promise kept. The days after Ember's return wove a new rhythm. Into the Brooklyn apartment, her presence a steady pulse against the lingering ache of her brief absence, the snow outside melting into slush as March crept closer. Noah refused to let her out of sight, his sneakers trailing her from room to room, his hands gentle as he brushed her brown fur, now shinier with regular meals, her amber eyes glowing brighter each day. Elliot fixed the backyard gate the morning after the scare, his drill whining, as he bolted a new latch in place, his dockworker's hands steady, but his heart still raw from the panic of loss. Maya moved through her hospital shifts with a lighter step, her nurse's calm bolstered by Ember's recovery. Her smiles warmer when she came home to find Noah teaching Ember to roll over with bits of carrot as treats. The apartment felt alive. Again, the living room's clutter softened by Ember's sprawl on the couch, her red collar a bright slash against the faded cushions, her tail thumping when Noah laughed. Elliot caught himself watching her more, his skepticism fading as he saw Noah's confidence grow the boy's shoulders straighter, his voice surer since Ember came back. They took her to the park one Saturday, the air crisp but warming, the grass patchy with mud and new green. Noah ran with Ember, her leash loose as she bounded after a tennis ball, her small body nimble, her amber eyes locked on the prize. Maya snapped, photos her phone clicking, as Ember leapt, her ears flopping, Noah's grin wide enough to crack the grey sky. Neighbors stopped to pet her their questions about her story, drawing Noah out, his shyness melting, as he told them about finding her in the snow, naming her Ember for her eyes. Elliot stood back, his hands in his pockets, his chest tight with pride. At his son's ease, the way he knelt to clip Ember's leash, his care instinctive now. The shelter called midweek no claims, no posters, Ember officially unclaimed after the hold period, and Maya suggested they celebrate her voice soft but certain. They bought a small cake from the bodega vanilla, with too sweet frosting, and Noah wrote Ember's name in blue icing, his fingers sticky, but his smile unwavering. Ember sat at their feet during the makeshift party, her nose twitching at the sugar. She sent her tail wagging when Noah slipped her a crumb. The family's laughter filled the apartment, a sound Elliot hadn't realized he'd missed until it echoed off the walls. Maya proposed a trip to a shelter event, a community adoption day, the same place they'd taken Ember for her intake. Her nurse's logic, seeing it as a way to give back. Elliot hesitated, his mind on the landlord's rules, the vet bills still unpaid, but Noah's eyes lit up, his voice eager. Can we show them how great she is? They arrived at the park the next weekend, the shelter's tents bright against the muddy grass, music humming from a speaker, kids running with balloons. Ember trotted beside Noah, her red collar gleaming, her steps confident as she navigated the crowd. The shelter staff recognized her, their faces softening as Noah explained her journey, his voice steady despite the eyes on him. We found her outside the diner. He said she was alone, but now she's ours. A small crowd gathered, their claps warm. When Noah finished, Ember sitting tall, her amber eyes scanning the faces like she understood. Maya squeezed Elliot's hand, her fingers warm, her eyes misty as she whispered, "He's growing up right in front of us." Elliot nodded, his throat tight. The sight of Noah speaking to strangers, a far cry from the boy who'd barely talked after his grandmother's death. Ember stayed close, her body pressed against Noah's leg, her calmness a shield against the bustle. A little girl in a pink coat asked to pet her, her hand trembling as Ember leaned in, her nose gentle against the girl's palm. The girl's mother thanked Noah, her voice thick, saying her daughter hadn't smiled like that in weeks. Elliot felt it then, a shift deeper than relief. Ember wasn't just theirs, she was a spark for others too. They drove home in silence, the car warm with the weight of the day. Ember curled in Noah's lap, her breathing soft. Maya reached for Elliot's hand, her thumb tracing his knuckles, a quiet acknowledgement of what Ember had done, not just for Noah, but for them all. At home, Noah hung Ember's leash by the door, his movements careful, his face older somehow. "She's happy now," he said, more to himself than them. And Elliot saw it, the truth of it, in Ember's relaxed sprawl by the radiator, her amber eyes half closed but alive. The park event lingered in Elliot's mind, a reminder of how fast they'd fallen. For her, how she'd filled the cracks in their grief-worn lives. He looked at Noah, now sprawled on the couch with Ember's head in his lap, a book open, but unread, his fingers tracing her ears. The boy who'd once frozen at the sight of pain was thawing, Ember's trust pulling him forward. Elliot sat beside them, his hand resting on Ember's back, her warmth steady under his palm, and knew they were hers as much as she was theirs. The Brooklyn apartment hummed with a new rhythm as March softened the city's edges, Ember's presence a steady warmth that seeped into every corner, her brown fur now sleek, her amber eyes glowing with a quiet confidence that mirrored Noah's growing ease. Noah woke each day with purpose, his sneakers by the door, his hands quick to clip Ember's red collar for morning walks, her tail wagging as they circled the block, her nose sniffing the thawing air. Elliot watched from the kitchen, his coffee cooling his dockworker's hands still calloused, but lighter somehow as he saw Noah's smile, the boy's shyness fading since Ember's return from that terrifying afternoon. Maya moved through her hospital shifts with a renewed calm, her nurse's heart lifted by the apartment's liveliness. Ember's playful tugs at Noah's socks, her soft snores by the radiator. The shelter's adoption event had left a mark. Noah's brief speech about finding Ember replaying in Elliot's mind, a spark of pride for his son who'd stood tall in front of strangers. A call came one evening, the shelter's number flashing. On Maya's phone, her voice curious as she answered. The coordinator, a woman with a warm Brooklyn accent, invited Noah and Ember to visit a pediatric ward at a nearby children's hospital, a place where kids recovering from surgeries or long illnesses needed comfort. We saw how Ember calmed people at the event. The coordinator said she's got a gift. Noah's eyes lit up, his homework forgotten on the kitchen table, his voice eager. Can we go, Mom? Dad? Maya hesitated, her nurse's mind weighing the logistics. But Elliot saw the certainty in Noah's face, the same stubborn hope that had stopped them outside the diner. Let's do it, he said, surprising himself, his heart tugged by the memory of Noah's guilt over his grandmother. The boy's need to help, now channeled into Ember. They arrived at the hospital the next Saturday. The building's bright walls and tall windows a stark contrast to its quiet gravity, the air thick with antiseptic and hope. Noah held Ember's leash loosely, her steps slow as they entered the ward, her amber eyes scanning the room with an instinct that hushed even the nurses. Kids lay in beds or sat in chairs, some with IV lines, others with braces, their faces pale, but curious. A girl named Lily sat by a window, her knees pulled up, her eyes distant since a heart surgery weeks ago, her chart noting she hadn't spoken much. Ember paused, her ears twitching, then walked straight to Lily, her small body settling at the girl's feet, her head resting on her paws so close their shadows merged. Noah sat nearby, cross-legged on the floor, his voice soft as he told Lily Ember's story, how they'd found her in the snow, how she'd chosen them. Lily's fingers twitched, her hand inching toward Ember's fur, then touching it lightly, her lips parting to whisper, "Pretty." The nurse nearby gasped, her clipboard, forgotten, her eyes wide as she mouthed to Maya, "That's the first word in weeks." Elliot stood by the door, his throat tight, his dockworker's pragmatism, no match for the weight of that moment. Ember's stillness, a bridge to a girl lost in pain. Maya's hand found his, her fingers squeezing, her nurse's heart racing as she saw the power of Ember's quiet presence. Noah stayed for an hour, moving with Ember from bed to bed, her instinct guiding her to the kids who needed her most, a boy with a leg brace who smiled when she nudged his hand, a toddler who giggled when Ember's tail brushed her arm. The nurses watched in awe, their whispers spreading Ember's name like a secret. Noah's face glowed, his shyness gone as he answered questions about her favorite tricks, her love for chasing socks. Back home that night, Ember sprawled on the couch, her energy spent, but her amber eyes content as Noah sat beside her, a notebook open in his lap. He wrote about Lily, about the boy with the brace, his pencil scratching, as he noted their names, the time they smiled, what they said, if anything. Maya read over his shoulder, her voice thick as she said, "You're doing something big, Noah." He shrugged, but his cheeks flushed, his fingers ruffling Ember's ears. "She knows who needs her," he said, like it's her job. Elliot sat across from them, his coffee untouched, his mind on the hospital the way. Ember had lain by Lily without demand, just presence. He thought of his own childhood of loss unhealed, and saw in Noah a strength he hadn't had at 12, a boy who'd learned to stop for pain because of a puppy in the snow. Maya suggested weekly visits, her voice firm now, her nurse's logic aligning with her heart, and Noah nodded, his notebook already filling with plans. Ember sighed, her head in Noah's lap, her red collar glinting under the lamp, and Elliot felt it again, that spark, Ember's gift, not just to them, but to a world that needed her light. The Brooklyn apartment pulsed with a quiet energy as March gave way to softer skies, Ember's steady presence anchoring the family, her amber eyes a beacon in the mornings, when Noah clipped her red collar for walks, her brown fur now plush from good food and care. Noah's hospital visits had become a weekly ritual, his sneakers scuffing the pediatric ward's polished floors, Ember trotting beside him, her leash loose, her instincts sharp, as she sought out kids who needed her most. Elliot watched Noah grow, bolder, his 12-year-old frame taller, somehow his voice clearer when he spoke to nurses or parents, his notebook filling with names and moments, Lily's first smile, the toddler's giggle. Maya came along when her hospital shifts allowed her, nurse's eyes bright with pride, as Ember worked her quiet magic, her tail wagging gently when a child reached out. The apartment reflected this shift. Noah's homework done faster, his laughter louder when Ember chased a squeaky toy across the linoleum, Elliot's gruffness softening as he tossed the toy too, his dock worker's hands clumsy but willing. 1. Saturday at the ward. Ember paused in the hallway, her ears twitching, her amber eyes locking on a boy named Sam, who lay in a bed, his legs braced from a car accident, his hands still, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. Sam hadn't moved much in weeks. The nurses said his silence, a no therapy, had breached his chart heavy, with words like trauma and withdrawal. Noah guided Ember closer, his steps careful, his voice low as he sat on the floor beside the bed, not pushing, just present. Ember lay down her small body, stretched out her head, resting on her paws, so close to Sam's hand, it nearly touched her fur. Noah spoke softly, telling Sam about Ember's snowbound start, how she'd waited outside the diner, how her eyes glowed like embers in the cold. Sam's fingers twitched, a faint movement the nurses missed, but Noah saw his breath catching as he kept talking about Ember's love for chasing socks, her trick of high-fiving for treats. Ember stayed still, her amber eyes steady, her warmth a silent offer. And after 20 minutes, Sam's hand slid an inch, then another, until his fingers brushed her ear. The nurse nearby froze her pen, pausing mid-note, her eyes wide as she whispered, "To Maya." "That's new, he's never reached out." Maya's hand covered her mouth, her nurse's composure cracking as she watched Sam's fingers linger on Ember's fur, his face softening just a fraction. Elliot stood by the door, his coffee cup forgotten in his hand, his chest tight with a mix of awe and ache, the memory of Noah's own silence after his grandmother's death echoing in this moment. Sam's voice came then, barely audible, a single word: "Dog." The room stilled, the nurse's gasp, the only sound as Noah's eyes shone, his smile small but fierce. "Do you want to pet her?" he asked, and Sam didn't answer, but his hand stayed, his fingers tracing Ember's ear like it was the first thing he'd felt in months. Ember didn't move, her stillness a gift, her amber eyes holding Sam's gaze like a promise. The visit ended, with Sam's hand still on her fur, his mother arriving, her face crumpling with hope as the nurse explained what happened. Noah walked out with Ember, his notebook clutched tight, his pencil later scratching out the moment Sam, 11:32 a.m., touched her ear, said "dog," looked alive. Back home, Ember sprawled on the couch, her energy spent, but her tail thumping when Noah sat beside her. His notebook open, his voice quiet as he read the entry to Maya. She cried, then her tears silent, her arms pulling Noah close, her nurse's heart overwhelmed by her son's empathy, by Ember's reach. Elliot listened from the kitchen, his coffee cold, his mind on Sam's hand, the way it had moved like a door creaking open. He thought of his own losses, his childhood cat, his failure to shield Noah from grief, and saw in Ember a power he couldn't name, not just healing but awakening. Noah kept up the visits each week, Ember seeking out Sam again and others, her presence a bridge for kids like Lily, who now spoke in short sentences, her hand steady when she petted Ember. At home, Ember was still their dog, her playful pounces on Noah's socks, her sprawl by the radiator, her amber eyes meeting Elliot's when he read the paper. But she was more now, her hospital work, a thread tying the family to something bigger. Maya framed Noah's notebook page about Sam, the words inked in his careful scrawl hanging by the door, a testament to Ember's gift. Elliot watched Noah grow, his son's eyes brighter, his steps surer, his heart open in ways Elliot hadn't been at 12. Ember curled in Noah's lap that night, her red collar glinting, her sigh content, and Elliot knew she wasn't just a dog, she was their spark pulling them toward light, carrying Sam and others with them. Spring's first warmth touched Brooklyn, the March snow melting into puddles that reflected the city's restless sky. Ember's presence in the apartment, a steady glow, her amber eyes catching the morning light as Noah clipped her red collar for Their daily walk, her brown fur sleek now, her steps lively. Noah's hospital visits had woven a new thread into the family's life. His notebook thick with entries about kids like Sam and Lily, each break through a spark that lit his 12-year-old face with purpose. Elliot watched his son grow bolder, his voice steady when he spoke to nurses, his sneakers scuffing the ward's floors with confidence once buried under grief. Maya joined when her hospital shifts allowed her nurse's pride shining as Ember moved. From bed to bed, her tail wagging gently for kids who reached out, her stillness a comfort for those who didn't. The shelter called one evening, their coordinator's voice warm, with an invitation to a Hope Day event at a community center, a celebration of therapy animals and the lives they'd touched. "We'd love for Noah and Ember to come," she said, "maybe share their story." Noah's eyes widened his homework, forgotten his hands ruffling Ember's ears as he nodded. "Can we, Dad?" Elliot felt a tug of pride, his dock worker's pragmatism softened by Noah's eagerness, his memory of Sam's faint dog still vivid. Maya smiled, her fingers brushing Noah's hair. "Let's show them what Ember's done," she said, her voice thick with the weight of their journey from that snowy diner night. The community center was alive with color banners strung across a park nearby, music humming from food trucks, kids chasing balloons in the warming air. Ember trotted beside Noah, her red collar gleaming, her amber eyes alert as they navigated the crowd, her leash loose in Noah's hand. The shelter had set up a small stage, its podium draped in blue, a banner reading "Healing Through Hope" flapping in the breeze. Noah wore his best jeans, his hoodie swapped for a button-down, his fingers tugging at the collar as he scanned the crowd. Elliot stood with Maya, their hands clasped, her nurse's calm grounding him. As he watched Noah step forward, his notebook tucked under his arm, Ember sitting tall at his side. The coordinator introduced them, her voice carrying over the chatter. "Noah and Ember, a team who've brought light to our hospital kids." Noah took the microphone, his breath shaky, but his eyes finding Sam in the crowd, now walking with crutches, his mother beaming beside him. "I'm not good at speeches," Noah started. His voice small, then stronger, but Ember changed everything for me. He told their story, the diner, the snow. Her amber eyes waiting for someone to stop, how she'd helped him feel again after his grandmother's death, how she helped Sam and Lily and others find their way back. Ember sat still, her gaze steady, her presence a quiet anchor, as Noah's words flowed, his notebook open to a page he'd marked. "She taught me to see people who need you," he said, his voice clear now, even when they're quiet. The crowd clapped warm and steady, Sam's mother wiping her eyes as Sam tossed a small ball for Ember, her quick pounce drawing laughs. Elliot's chest tightened, his pride for Noah mixing with awe at Ember's reach, her ability to pull a boy. A family, a community toward hope. Maya squeezed his hand, her tears silent, her nurse's heart full, as she watched Sam limp forward to pet Ember, his smile brighter than his braces. The event buzzed on families sharing stories of therapy dogs, kids drawing pictures of Ember on butcher paper, their crayons bright against the graying day. Noah stayed by the stage, answering questions, his shyness gone, his voice steady as he told a girl how Ember learned to high-five. The shelter offered him a junior volunteer role, short weekend shifts, to help with new rescues, and Noah nodded, his eyes shining, his notebook already filling with ideas. Elliot watched from the crowd, his coffee swapped for a soda, his mind on the diner that cold February night when Noah's tug on his sleeve had changed everything. He saw it now, Ember wasn't just a dog, she was a spark igniting Noah's courage, Maya's hope, his own softening heart. A gust of wind rippled the banners, and Ember pressed against Noah's leg, her amber eyes scanning the crowd like she knew her place. Sam's mother approached later, her voice thick, as she thanked Noah for giving Sam a reason to move again. Noah shrugged, his cheeks flushed, but his smile steady. "Ember did it," he said, and she wagged her tail as if agreeing. The drive home was quiet, the car warm with the day's wait, Ember curled in Noah's lap, her red collar glinting under streetlights. Maya reached for Elliot's hand, her fingers warm, her voice soft. "She's made us better, all of us." Elliot nodded, his throat tight, the memory of Noah's speech, his son's words about seeing the quiet ones echoing in his chest. At home, Noah hung Ember's leash by the framed photo of her mid-leap, his fingers tracing the glass, a silent vow to keep going. Ember sprawled by the radiator, her sigh content, her amber eyes half closed, but alive, and Elliot knew this was more than a rescue. It was a beginning for them all. April's warmth settled over Brooklyn, the city's sidewalks softening under new sun, Ember's presence in the apartment, a radiant constant, her amber eyes catching the morning light, as Noah clipped her red collar for their daily walk, her brown fur gleaming with health, her tail wagging like a metronome of joy. Noah's hospital visits and the Hope Day event had deepened the family's bond, his notebook now a thick record of kids like Sam and Lily, their smiles and words inked in his careful scrawl a testament to Ember's quiet power. Elliot watched Noah move with purpose, his 12-year-old frame taller, his voice steadier as he told Maya about a new trick he'd taught Ember, a gentle paw shake that made the hospital kids laugh. Maya's nurse's heart swelled her shifts. At the hospital lighter now, her smiles brighter, when she came home to Ember sprawled on the couch, her red collar, a bright slash against the cushions. The shelter had become a second home, Noah's junior volunteer role filling weekends with crate cleaning and dog walking, his sneakers scuffed, but his eyes alive with purpose. Elliot found himself volunteering too, his dock worker's hands clumsy, with leashes, but willing, his heart tugged by the strays who reminded him of Ember's snowy start. The family gathered one evening around the kitchen table, the air thick with the scent of Maya's lasagna. Noah's notebook open, as he read about a girl who'd drawn Ember a picture at the hospital, her first artwork since surgery. "We should adopt her officially," Noah said, his voice firm, his eyes meeting Elliot's, then Maya's. The shelter had cleared Ember's hold period months ago. No claims, no calls, but the formality lingered, a final step to make her theirs. Maya nodded, her fingers tracing the table's scars, her nurse's logic aligning with her heart. "Let's do it," she said. "Make it real." Elliot felt a surge of agreement, his pragmatism worn thin by Ember's warmth, the way she'd pulled Noah from grief's shadow, his own heart from its guarded walls. They drove to the shelter the next day, the paperwork simple but weighty, Noah's signature beside theirs, his hand steady as he wrote Ember's name. The staff gifted a new collar, black with silver stitching, her name embroidered in bold, a tag, reading "Family Forever," that glinted when Noah clipped it on. Ember sat tall, her amber eyes bright as if she understood, her tail thumping against the floor. The family celebrated with a trip to Coney Island, the beach a stretch of sun-warmed sand, the waves rolling soft and slow under a sky streaked with pink. Noah unclipped Ember's leash in a quiet stretch, her paws tentative at first, then bold as she trotted toward the surf, her nose lifting to the salt air. She bolted then in wide looping circles, her ears flopping, her tail curled in pure joy, Noah chasing after her, his laughter sharp and free, his sneakers kicking up sand. Elliot stood with Maya, her arm around his waist, her hair loose in the breeze, her eyes misty as she watched Noah run his 12-year-old joy, a far cry from the boy who'd barely spoken in January. Ember leapt into the foam, the waves startling her into a playful bark, her first loud sound in weeks, a burst of life that made Noah double over laughing. Maya snapped Polaroids, her camera clicking as Ember shook off water, her amber eyes wild with delight, Noah's grin glowing against the golden sky. Elliot's chest ached in the best way, his dockworker's stoicism, no match for the sight of his son so alive, so whole. They spread a blanket on the sand, Noah flopping beside Ember, her head in his lap, her breathing steady as the tide. Maya leaned against Elliot, her voice soft. "We needed her more than we knew." He nodded his hand, finding hers the memory of that. Diner night, vivid the snow, the cold, Noah's tug on his sleeve. Back home, Noah carried the Polaroids to his room, pinning one to his wall, Ember mid-leap, her eyes like embers against the sea. Maya framed another for the living room, placing it beside Noah's notebook page about Sam, the words a quiet monument to their journey. Elliot watched Noah sleep that night, Ember curled at his feet, her new collar glinting under the moonlight, her sigh content. He thought of the hospital kids, of Sam's faint dog, of Lily's whispered pretty. And new Ember's adoption wasn't just a formality, it was a promise kept. The apartment felt fuller now, not just with Ember's warmth, but with the life she'd sparked, Noah's purpose, Maya's hope, his own softening heart. They'd chosen her that snowy night, but she'd chosen them too. her amber eyes a light that led them forward. Noah woke the next morning, his voice bright, as he planned their next hospital visit. His notebook open to a new page, his hand sketching. Ember's face. Elliot stood in the doorway, his coffee warm, his heart steady, knowing this was home, Ember's home, their home, a place where love had grown from a spark in the cold. April's gentle warmth gave way to May's vibrant bloom in Brooklyn, the city's sidewalks alive with new green Ember's presence in the apartment, a radiant anchor, her amber eyes glowing as Noah clipped her black collar each morning, her silver. Tag reading family forever, jingling softly. Noah's hospital visits had grown into a mission, his notebook a thick chronicle of kids like Sam and Lily, their breakthroughs inked in his careful scrawl, his 12-year-old heart fueled by Ember's quiet power. Elliot watched his son stride with purpose, his sneakers scuffing the ward's floors, his voice steady as he introduced Ember to new patients, her tail wagging gently for those who reached out, her stillness a comfort for those who didn't. Maya's nurse's pride shone brighter, her hospital shifts lighter as she joined Noah when she could, her eyes misty, when Ember lay beside a child, her amber gaze a bridge to hope. The shelter was now a second home, Noah's junior volunteer role expanding to include reading to rescue dogs, his voice calming even the skittish ones, while Elliot helped with crate repairs, his dock worker's hands steady, his heart softened by strays who echoed Ember's snowy start. Noah came home one afternoon, his backpack slung low, his eyes bright with an idea he'd been turning over since the Hope Day event. "I want to start a school club," he said, "for animal rescue, to teach kids how to help dogs like Ember." Maya nodded, her fingers brushing his hair, her voice warm with encouragement. "That's big, Noah, let's make it happen." Elliot felt a swell of pride, his pragmatism long replaced by awe, at his son's drive, the boy who'd once frozen at the diner, now leading with a heart wide open. Noah pitched the club to his school the next week, his notebook open as he spoke to the principal, Ember, sitting beside him, her presence a quiet endorsement, her amber eyes steady as the room filled with nods. The club launched with 5 members meeting after school to make posters for shelter events, their laughter echoing in the classroom, Ember sprawled by Noah's feet, her tail thumping when they praised her. Elliot volunteered at the shelter more, his weekends spent walking dogs or fixing fences, his gruffness gone as he told new families about Ember's journey from snow to home. Maya framed a new notebook page, Noah's bold words inked across it. "Ember's not just a dog, she's proof you can find light in the cold." It hung by the front door beside Sam's entry and Ember's beach Polaroid, a gallery of their transformation. The hospital hosted a small ceremony one Sunday. Nothing grand, just families and staff in a circle of folding chairs, a sign reading, "Circle of Light," glowing under string lights. Kids who'd found healing through Ember and other therapy animals brought tokens of their progress drawings, poems, a braided bracelet. Sam, now steady on crutches, brought a tiny basketball he'd tossed with Ember, his grin wide as he thanked Noah in front of everyone. Lily spoke too, her voice clear now, her hand steady, as she gave Ember a crayon sketch of her amber eyes. Noah stood with Ember, his button down, tugging at his shoulders, his voice soft but sure as he said, "Ember showed me how to show up for someone every day." The crowd clapped, warm and steady, Maya's tears silent as she squeezed Elliot's hand, her nurse's, heart full. Elliot's chest ached, his pride for Noah mixing with gratitude for Ember, who sat tall, her black collar glinting, her presence, a spark that lit the room. The hospital named Ember an honorary therapy dog, her tag updated with Brave Paws volunteer, a silver disc that jingled beside Family Forever. Noah beamed, clipping it on his fingers, tracing the words like a vow. Back home, the apartment buzzed with the day's warmth. Noah sprawled on the couch, Ember's head in his lap, his notebook open to a new entry. May 15th. Sam walked. Lily drew, Ember belongs to everyone now. Maya cooked dinner, her lasagna filling the air with comfort, Elliot setting the table, his dock worker's hands gentle, as he placed Noah's notebook by the framed photos. They ate in quiet harmony, Ember at their feet, her sigh content, her amber eyes half closed but alive. Elliot walked her that night, the Brooklyn streets soft under starlight, her leash loose as she trotted beside him, her nose lifting to the spring air. He paused by the diner, its neon sign still flickering, the spot where they'd found her now just pavement, but alive in his memory. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice low. Ember's eyes meeting his like she understood. She tugged the leash, gently leading him home where Noah waited by the door, his smile bright, his heart whole. The club grew over weeks, more kids joining their posters, dotting Brooklyn's poles, Noah's voice a beacon for rescue. Elliot looked at his son, the boy who'd once stood silent in grief, now glowing with purpose, and knew Ember had saved them all, her light, a legacy for every heart she touched.